Time marches on for all of us, I suppose, and nostalgia becomes more important with the passing of time. A few years ago, while away for a few days, we were in North Down, staying for a few days in Bangor, and travelled along the North Down coast to a little place called Malile. I don't know how many of you know it, but on a clear day from Malile, you can see the west coast of Scotland. And even more nostalgic, I reflect upon the fact that that's where 60% of my DNA has come from. Malile is a beautiful place, particularly on a summer's day, and the reason I reflect upon it with some nostalgia is many years ago, while preparing for ministry, we were brought to stay there as students in a place run by the Boys Brigade, and in that place we were prepared in a week-long session for dealing with youth. It was a comprehensive course, as you can imagine, taking a week. It was a condensed course, yet comprehensive. And you might ask at this stage, looking back through the hourglass of time, what do I recall from that week? Well, not a lot. Not because of the quality of what was contained in our preparations. We had some very important people who came to see us and indeed had much to share with us from the background of the YMCA and various other youth organizations, from the uniformed organizations of the church. So I'm not making light of their contributions. It's my recollection that is at fault here. But I do recall one very important contribution, which I think has been something that I have struggled with for the whole of my ministry. We were addressed by a gentleman called Reverend Tom Kilty, rector of Beaver Parish in Belfast, who told us in probably one of the most enduring nuggets that has been left in my memory, that the most effective way to deal with young people is to know their name. Now, I thought it was obvious at the time, but with the passing of the years, I've come to learn just how important that advice is. Know their names. Not just youth, by the way. Everybody. It opens an immediate door. Even if you haven't been formally introduced, if you know who they are and can call someone by their name, you have immediately opened a relationship. You've at least disposed of one essential question, and you know how to go from there. You might reflect on how good their name is, how geographically distinct their name is, how you knew people of that name in the past and how they had made a big impression on you. You could go on and on, but it has opened a door. And that's why when I reflect upon our first reading this morning and those wonderful words, wonderfully poetic words of Isaiah, "Fear not, for I have redeemed you. I have called you by your name, and you are mine." These words are expressed within a context of suffering, uncertainty, and anxiety. People who have been taken away from their home place as exiles, taken away to the land of Babylon, left there for generations, are now returning to a land that many of them have never seen. They're coming back to family possessions which they have never known. They're trying to establish a new sense of connectedness. And yet God, through his prophet, extends to them the encouragement of them being known by their name. Each and every one of them, the many hundreds and thousands of them, are known by God and treasured by him, and they are his. Soon these people will return. They will build a new life. They will rebuild the walls of Jerusalem. They will establish their practice of worship. They will be known within their own communities. They will indeed bear their names, and people will recognize them for who they are, the treasured people of God, called home by him. In our gospel reading this morning, we hear of the well-known story of Jesus' own baptism. Baptized in the River Jordan, it is the moment when baptism is transformed. Up until that moment, baptism is an expression of failure and sadness. It is an expression of falling short of God's own standards. But from the moment when Jesus is baptized, it is no longer about failure. It is no longer about missing the mark. It is about the power of the Holy Spirit to enable us each day in our lives. We are called. We are called to be God's people. We are known by our names. And from the moment when the Holy Spirit inspires us, we are called in the strength of God to go into the world and to be his witnesses for that truth. But the reassuring message of Isaiah this morning is that we are not journeying alone, that we are known by God, that we are of God, and we are treasured because he calls us by his name. We might reflect this morning as we see the many points of suffering in our world today. We might reflect upon the fact that those who suffer most are also known by God, that he does know them by name. And that places an obligation upon all of us to respond to the needs of those who, like ourselves, are treasured and loved by God. During this time of COVID, there has been a major rethink in many of our ways of communicating, our many ways of assisting others, and in our ways of caring. We've been restricted in the ways we can embrace one another. We've even been restricted in how we can even recognize one another. As someone said to me recently, she had developed the new skill of recognizing people from the eyes up. But however we do it, and however we are constrained within these present demands of this time, God is calling us on once again as his beloved people, treasured and known by him. We are to take confidence in the fact that we are his, and based upon that wonderful confidence, to be instruments of expressing that confidence, that love and concern to the world that waits for us. God calls his people by name back from slavery into freedom. He calls them back into a land that they do not know. But he reassures them that not only does he know them, but that he will be with them. In that spirit of being loved, known, named, and called by God this morning, at the beginning of a new year, let us place our confidence in his hands, express our love for one another as the fellow named members of God's family, and in doing so embrace the reality of what it is to be loved, named and possessed by the God who loves us.